How can you create a compelling story that showcases the trials and tribulations of a complex society, complete with conflict and fundamental questions of the human condition, all while adhering to a strict moral code? This is the question that many filmmakers were forced to answer with the emergence of the Motion Picture Production Code, also known as Hays Code. The Motion Picture Production Code emerged after a steady unrest among conservative consumers surrounding the seemingly morally corrupt environment of Hollywood, the overdose of actress Olive Thomas in 1920, the indictment of Fatty Arbuckle and the manslaughter of Virginia Rapp in 1921, and the unsolved murder of director William Desmond in 1922 were all subsequent events that furthered this unrest. And because of the 1915 Mutual Film Corps versus Industrial Commission of Ohio case, the Supreme Court had already ruled that films were not protected by the First Amendment. Quote, "The exhibition of moving pictures is a business, pure and simple, originated and conducted for profit like other spectacles, and not to be regarded as part of the press of the country or as organs of public opinion within the meaning of freedom of speech and publication guaranteed by the Constitution of Ohio." End quote. Between 1914 and 1922, many states began to form film censorship boards, which sought to prevent the dubious morals of Hollywood from influencing the greater public. From these boards came a big push for federal regulation of motion pictures, something that would greatly detract power from the production executives and studio owners. This caused a panic. From this panic emerged William H. Hays. Hays was formerly chairman of the Republican National Committee and was soon appointed as president of the newly formed Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, or the MPPDA. The MPPDA created a first list in 1927 of 36 quote-unquote don'ts and be carefuls, a short guideline of topics for filmmakers to avoid or treat with caution. However, as Martin Quigley and Jesuit priest Father Daniel A. Lord got involved 2 years later, the list was extended and was solidified in the 1930s by Hays' Code. In a desperate attempt to avoid government oversight and a dilution of studio executives' power, studios had no choice but to abide by the code. So, what are the rules of the code? Well, the premise, according to the document, is to ensure that, quote, "no picture should lower the moral standards of those who see it," end quote. Some of the guidelines are as follows. The sympathy of the audience should never be on the side of evil or wrongdoing. No profanity, including the use of Jesus and God's name outside of in praise. No licentious or suggested nudity. No sexual perversion, especially referring to depictions of homosexuality and other sexual orientations. No insult to the clergy, no interracial relationships, and no willful offense to any race or creed. There was also a stress on exercising caution and discussing topics such as international relations, religion, sympathy for criminals, prostitution, first night scenes, man and woman in bed together, the institution of marriage, and law enforcement. With all these restrictions and a $32,000 fine for disobeying the code to match, it seemed near impossible to create films that examined the human condition in a way similar to films like Dorothy Arzner's Merrily We Go to Hell. Merrily We Go to Hell was released on June 10, 1932, right before the code became backed by a financial penalty. Following the couple Jerry and Joan through addiction, unfaithfulness, and both male and female sexuality, this film is the epitome of a pre-code romantic dramedy. The three biggest offenses of the film, in the eyes of the code, departing from its already sensational title, are its handling of playwright and reporter Jerry Corbett's alcoholism, played by Frederick March, Jerry's constant cheating on his naive and faithful wife Joan, played by Sylvia Sidney, and the subsequent subversion of the institution of marriage when the relationship is temporarily depicted as somewhat of an open relationship.
Well, merrily we go to hell.
Merrily, you stop this and go to work. Come on.
Arzner's focus throughout the creation of this film was in showing a flawed relationship without censorship, particularly in the depiction of Joan's changing morality, choosing to engage in Jerry's cheating by entertaining other men herself. Arzner presents a view of female sexuality that hadn't often been explored in such a way by other films of the time. Likewise, it temporarily places male and female sexuality on somewhat of an even playing field, as Diana Drum put it in her article about the film. Quote, "Since they are equal partners in the marriage, if Jerry takes liberties, so will she." Drum also reminds us that Arzner, being a woman in a male-dominated industry, especially as a director, contributed greatly to the subversions this film presents. As her biography in Senses of Cinema discusses, quote, "Perhaps somewhat more successful than any attempt to label her as an overtly proto-feminist director has been the movement to categorize Arzner as a director concerned with the cinematic workings of femininity." End quote. This concern enabled her to explore elements of womanhood through Joan, for example, that might have been considered both, quote, "sexual perversion" and an insult to the institution of marriage, had it been released during the time where Hays Code was enforced. The swearing off of further unfaithfulness and alcoholism by the end of the film might have salvaged it some, but our sympathies had already remained with both of the characters to some extent throughout the film, and throughout their wrongdoing, so much so that it surely would have been considered an issue. Well, most of our sympathies. Now, Merrily We Go to Hell accomplished a narrative that would prove to be difficult for films that were developed during the production code era. That is not to say it was impossible, though, and Preston Sturges's The Lady Eve proved it. The Lady Eve was released February 25th, 1941, smack dab in the height of production censorship. Despite it, the film managed to portray a thorough, layered representation of a vast amount of behavior the code condemned, all while keeping our sympathies with both the main characters and just barely managing to skate by the code's censorship. Much like Merrily We Go to Hell, The Lady Eve was concerned with topics like sexuality and faithfulness between a couple consisting of one naive partner and one partner doing the deceiving. The difference here, though, was that the male character, Henry Fonda's Charles Pike, was the naive character, while Barbara Stanwyck's Jean Harrington took on the role of the deceiver. Already, this is a subversion that old Hollywood might have found shocking, but hadn't violated any censorship restrictions. As Nora Gilbert's essay on comparing Victorian censorship to that of the production code era states, quote, "Sturges's films are praised for possessing an anarchic energy, for restoring to American film a sense of social satire equaled only in Chaplin's films," end quote. So it's no surprise that this filmmaker in particular would be the one to have so many close calls. The biggest offenses this film showcases, though, are thinly veiled sexual innuendo, a sort of running joke on the institution of marriage, and, of course, sympathy for criminals. The film follows card shark Jean Harrington's attempts to con naive snake scientist Charles Pike by means of seduction, an effort that turns sour when she ends up truly falling in love with him. In order to get revenge and eventually remedy the rift her true identity places between them, Jean adopts another false identity, Lady Eve, marries Charles, and makes up several tales of past lovers to get Charles to abandon her.
I suppose that's why I fell in love with you.
Thank you.
I wonder if now would be the time to tell you about Herman.
Herman? Herman? Who was Herman?
This, of course, sends him running right back into Jean's arms, declaring their love for each other and cheekily confessing both being married. This instance in particular is one of Sturges's biggest methods of towing the line with the production code. This sort of quote-unquote cheating, which would have otherwise been problematic, is thus able to scoot by as a simple identity joke. Of course, there's no way to discuss this film's cunning workarounds than to discuss its innuendo. One of the most famous scenes showcasing this is the scene in which Jean and Charles speak, while Jean rests on a chaise, cheek to cheek with the increasingly flustered and visibly frustrated Charles.
I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
I wouldn't have frightened you for anything in the world. I mean, if there's anyone in the world I wouldn't have wanted to, it's you.
This scene, paired with clever transitions with clear gags and not-so-veiled allusions to sexual topics, makes for what could be considered a sexual comedy without ever breaching the conditions Hays Code put forth. In this wit, Sturgis is able to create just as compelling and entertaining a narrative as Merrily We Go to Hell, without getting its filmmaker in trouble. Jeffrey O'Brien puts it as such, quote, "In the era of the production code, Sturgis gets away with making comedy out of sexual arousal." End quote. Even beyond that, the film is able to create a satire of wealthy society and root our sympathy and love with characters who con the wealthy characters around them, and teach them lessons about the real world. A story about love and where it falls within such a society is the perfect film to toy around with the increasingly conservative time period it was placed in. Both Merrily We Go to Hell and The Lady Eve accomplished something magnificent for the time, complex narratives about equally as complex situations. With the censorship the production code placed on the time, many films were stunted from achieving the same level of nuance and entertainment, all in the name of making things more palatable for a conservative audience. But of course, these stories and their strengths lived on to contribute to a later cultural shift that would then return a state of greater artistic freedom to the silver screen.
Are you sure we're on the right boat, Sylvester?